I'm Janice Penner, and I am an employee of the FASD Cross Ministry Committee. I work as their program coordinator for the Alberta Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder Service Network program. Dwaine will be giving us a presentation this afternoon entitled Unique Needs of Students with FASD. It's the third in the three-part learning series for educators on FASD. We have a lot of other video conferencing series, but this is the third one in this session. With great pleasure, I can introduce someone who I consider a friend. I've known Dwaine for a few years. He's been an active participant, committee member, speaker, moderator, helper at our the last Alberta conference and the International FASD conference. He was one of our keynote addresses at the last conference. And here's where I have some important notes I have to say about you. Dwaine is an educational psychologist and certified coach working with children, family, and educators. He's contributed to many books, publications, Alberta education publications, and I'm sure you're familiar with some of them, Teaching Students with FASD, and a series, Positive Behavior in Alberta Schools. He's also co-author of a resource book, ABCs for Success, Attention Deficit Disorders. As I said, I've had the privilege of knowing Dwaine in our joint involvement through our last conferences. And from what I know about Dwaine, he's passionate about his work and he's educated in the field of FASD. He brings knowledge, experience, and a passion to this work. It's my pleasure to introduce Dwaine. Thank you very much, Janice.
Wow, applause from around. Thank you very much. Thank you, Janice, for that wonderful introduction. The unique needs of students with FASD. It's my privilege to be here today, and it's my privilege to be part of this series. I've had a chance to look at some of the videos that have already been done, Dr. Pai's video, and I know that Marjorie Carter also spoke last week, and I was just so impressed with the knowledge and skill that they've already brought to this series. And I'm just going to continue to build upon what you've already heard them say, addressing specifically the needs, the unique needs of kids with FASD. And before I even go further than that, what I'd like to do is emphasize in a very significant manner my belief. My belief is that it's great to talk about kids. It's great to talk about kids with a variety of different characteristics, characteristics including the strengths that they might have, characteristics including some of the unique needs that they might have. Every child that I've worked with is unique in his or her own skills and abilities. And I prefer the people first language where we talk about kids with FASD rather than talking about FASD as if that was them. Because each of the kids that I've worked with in homes, in schools, in community settings, and within our home, having a child come and stay with us, each of those kids is unique in their own ways. But we're starting to find more and more research that takes a look at some of the unique skills and abilities that they do have. And when we take a look at their unique skills and abilities, ideas, suggestions, strategies on how to help those kids to be most successful. So that's what I'm going to focus on today. Some of those unique skills, characteristics, and then hopefully leaving you with a few more ideas, strategies, techniques that you can use with your understanding with kids. And this is, by the way, a workshop. So we're going to get to a chance both here together as well as within the sites to do some things together as far as getting a little better understanding of what it might be like to have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. I remember about 6 years ago now, I was called to a school to do some consultation. And when I went to that school to do the consultation, I was fully aware that the student that I was supposed to see had been recently diagnosed as having fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. He was in a kindergarten program, rural school, and I was asked to come and see him. I went to the school, went into the, it was a portable outside of the actual school where the kindergarten was there. Opened the door to the portable and I heard this screeching and yelling and hollering going on. Walked in and there was an educational assistant, an adult, with a child, trying to hold that child in a chair while that child screamed and hollered and yelled, and it was just like somebody was committing some sort of dastardly deed. And all the aide was trying to do, the educational assistant was trying to do, was help that child to settle down. Talking about it further, I found out, and I'll call him Jason. Jason's not his real name. Each of the stories that I tell this afternoon, and to me it is about kids. It's about kids and teachers and families. And I know in this room we've got teachers, we've got educational assistants, we've got foster parents, we've got parents, and I'm sure throughout the sites we've got a wide range and scope of individuals who are here. Jason is a real boy. Jason is not his real name, and when I tell the stories this afternoon, they will be about real kids, real situations, but I do protect confidentiality. So when I share, I'm going to share with you different names, maybe different genders of the people. So Jason, not his real name. I'm coming in. I'm supposed to see Jason. When I walk in to see Jason, what am I seeing? I'm seeing him in this chair, thrashing all over the place, yelling and screaming. All the other kids are being grouped together by the teacher. The educational assistant is trying to keep this child, Jason, in a chair. And why was she trying to keep Jason in a chair? Well, Jason had been lining up. Everybody had been lining up to go outside for recess. And someplace in the line, hitting had taken place. And Jason was a person who had hit another child. And they had a rule in the classroom, you hit, you sit. So as soon as Jason hit, his EA took him over and sat him in a chair. And that's when it just escalated, and there was lots of screaming and yelling and hollering going on. And then I was coming into the situation supposedly to provide some ideas, some thoughts, some suggestions that might work well for Jason. And the EA looked at me and, almost tears in her eyes because she was trying really, really hard. And the teacher was trying really, really hard in trying to get Jason to participate, to cooperate, to do things within the classroom. So Jason, that's an introduction to Jason. How many people would like to know what I did with Jason? What some of the suggestions, not what I did, I didn't do anything. I just sat back and went, oh, but some of the ideas and suggestions. Okay, when we're going through today, I'm going to share with you some of the techniques, techniques that go along with the characteristics of some of the kids with FASD, and when I'm sharing those, I'll talk about Jason further, and I'll talk about some of the other kids that I've worked with as well. So Jason. When we talk about characteristics of Jason, characteristics of other kids with FASD, one of the neat things about kids, as I mentioned, is that they're all unique. But we found that brain damage caused by alcohol consumption results in difficulties for kids. What's neat about it, or maybe not so neat, but significant about it, is that different kids show different strengths. Different kids show different unique skills and abilities. So while I'll be talking about Jason and other kids, you can see which one of these characteristics apply to the students that you're working with, recognizing that certainly not all of them apply to everyone, but certainly some of them might apply to the student that you have. Some primary difficulties. So we found, for example, that kids will have difficulties in the areas of attention, in the areas of memory, in the areas of sensory processing of information, in areas of social skills and behavioral regulation. Some primary disabilities that can occur. So we're going to talk about some of those today. We're certainly not going to talk about all of them because what I'd like to do is concentrate on the ones that seem to be most significant for the time being and leave you with some ideas and strategies, leave something for other days that you can take a look at. Oh, by the way, in your handouts, you'll see that there are more slides in your handouts than I'll be showing today. And there's a specific reason for that, because we wanted to share with you much more information than I'd be talking about. So as you're following along in your handouts, you'll see that some slides aren't there. What we're going to do is talk about some of those primary disabilities. We're also going to talk about the difference between motivation and skill development, because clearly, when we talk about kids with FASD, sometimes there's a motivational issue. They don't do it because they don't want to do it. But sometimes they aren't doing it because they're not able to do it, even though the other kids around them are. So we'll get a little bit of an appreciation of that today. The other area that I'm going to talk about is just the importance of beliefs and how a person sees themselves, how a child with FASD might see themselves, and how we perceive that particular child. So that's some of the goals. It is brain damage. Second area that I'd like to talk about is that with regards to sensory integration. Do you want to bring that slide? When we talk about sensory integration, most of us are in a situation where we can see things, we hear things, we smell things, we taste things, we integrate all of our senses, and we're able to block out. We're able to block out the sounds of a fan that might be happening. We're able to block out somebody moving their chairs around. We're able to block out some of the smells that might be occurring within a classroom, to be able to focus, to pay attention. And that's great. We're able to integrate those senses. But for some kids with FASD, they have a really difficult time integrating those senses, pulling them together to be able to focus on what they needed to do and how they're going to do it. So their life, rather than looking like it's organized and all put together, as in this side where it's normal sensory integration, we pulled it together, it's like chaos. What does that lead to then? Disorganization, some confusion. It leads to some emotional reactivity, because if you're feeling anxious about what you're seeing or what you're doing, then you have a difficult time dealing with other information that's there. I'm going to give you some examples of that as we go through the various senses. When we talk about some of the senses now, let's get back to Jason. I'm watching him, trying to figure out more about Jason and what's happening with him. After he had quieted down from the chair, finally got him settled down, did some paper and pencil tasks, did some quieter activities, and then it was time to come to circle. And at circle time, what they ended up doing was singing "O Canada." And the teacher said, watch what Jason does when he sings, when we sing "O Canada," because Jason, I think he's seeking a lot of attention. I think he's one of those kids who have a high need for attention, because he's, well, just watch him, she said. So the kids got up and they started singing, and the teacher's singing, and "Oh Canada," and Jason drops to the floor. He covers up his ears. And the educational assistant goes over and says to him, "Okay, stand up." And he's on his knees again. His ears are covered up. And finally she says, "Okay, if you continue that, you're going to have to leave the circle." So he continued that. So she left the circle. And afterwards the teacher said, "See, what is that now? Is that attention-seeking behavior, or is that defiance? Or is it that he's got some sensory defensiveness?" If I stood up here and sang, "Oh, Ken!" Okay, in a few minutes, you start by chuckling, then you close your ears, then you fall on the floor. Only my daughter gets to hear me sing. Only my daughter is willing to put up with my singing. Yes, I can see you crunching your, yeah, it would be just like that for her. Sensory sensitivity. When we talk about sensory sensitivity, we can talk about a variety of different senses that go into it. Sensory sensitivity when it comes to touch. For example, some of the kids that I've worked with FASD, they get irritated by things. They get irritated by the label on the back of their jacket. They get irritated by the seams inside their socks. They get irritated by some of the touches that are out there right now. For example, I really like when kids who have attention deficit disorder, when they're sitting at the circle and they're paying attention to the teacher, I really like walking up to them and just rubbing their back gently and giving them that kind of positive feedback that lets them know that they are doing what I want them to do and that I'm just validating them at that point in time. So I like to do that with the kids who have attention deficit disorder. Some of the kids with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, if I touch them on the back like that, they just go, "Ah!" and have a really difficult time just with those touches. So that sensory sensitivity that is there as far as touch goes. I remember one time after I finished high school, I decided I was going to be a man. So I went up to Northern Manitoba to work on the rigs. They were building a dam up there and doing a lot of drilling that was taking place. And so I went up there to be a driller's helper. Well, that lasted about a day and a half. I was pretty skinny back then and not very strong. And they put me on the survey crew. So that was okay, because while those guys were working, I got to sit around lakes and swam. Oh, yeah, we were surveying those. But one day we frequently ate, of course, because we needed to feed ourselves, not to feed ourselves, and the camp cook made beef tongue. Beef tongue is really quite an interesting food to eat. I put this beef tongue in my mouth, and it had all those little bumps on it, and it was kind of, oh, and I just couldn't swallow it. And here are all these guys around that I'm supposed to be tough, and I just couldn't swallow it, and I was gagging on it. You know, it's kind of like a big blob of fat in your mouth, and it just didn't go down. We all have sensory sensitivities. It's just where they are. So I was pretty sensitive as far as that touch went in my mouth. So what can we do about it? High school student that I was working with. One of the things, I was asked to come in and watch him in the afternoon because in the afternoon he was having some major conflicts with his teacher and with the other students in the classroom. And what was happening was that when I started watching him, he was in his chair, lunchtime. After lunchtime, he was sitting down pretty quiet. 1 o'clock, lunch was over, so he was sitting there. 1:30 came, he was fidgeting in his seat, and you know they're wondering about you know how much of attentional difficulties the student had. He was undiagnosed. People suspected FASD, but weren't sure. There wasn't a process in place at that point in time for him to be assessed. So he's fidgety in his seat. And 2 o'clock came and he became more fidgety. And by 3 o'clock, if the teacher asked him to do something, sometimes he just tore a strip off of the teacher, said words that weren't appropriate, got sent to the office, and we're wondering what was taking place. I thought maybe there might be some sensory sensitivity there. So with the permission, now I need a volunteer here, a volunteer who would be willing to be that student, come and sit in this chair. Thank you very much. And your name is? Marlene. Marlene. Hi, Marlene. I'm Dwaine. Marlene, you're no longer going to be Marlene. You're going to be Bill. And I'm going to be Sally, the educational assistant who's been working with Bill because Bill's had all of these major behavioral blow-ups so far. He's a coded student, and Bill's there. So fidget around, move around a little bit. That's it, moving around in his chair, just like that. Oh, you're doing a good job, Bill. Super. So Bill was doing that, and I thought, well, let's try something. And one of the things that we tried was, now, first of all, Bill is a boy. I'm a gal. What we had to do is get permission from his parents, permission from the teacher, permission from the support, the admin, and let the class know what was going to take place. Can I rub your shoulders? Sure. Okay, good. So here's what we did. Every half an hour, on the half hour, the educational assistant went over. Bill was there fidgeting. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then would slip away. Half an hour would come. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What ended up happening was Bill's emotional reactivity decreased substantially because he was getting some deep pressure applied in those areas that seemed to be most affected by some sensory sensitivity. Thank you very much. How was that?
Very relaxing.
Very relaxing. Now, we're not sure, you know, maybe it was just that he relaxed him. It's a calming thing. It is a calming thing in a couple or a variety of different ways. If you talk to an occupational therapist, and that's where a multidisciplinary team assessment is really, really valuable, because an occupational therapist would focus on these kinds of things. But what it does is it calms not only your emotions, but it calms down your sensory system to help you to respond to it in a more effective manner. Now, what about sounds? How many people come from the era where you had blackboards in the room? Raise your hand. Okay. How many people, when the teacher went up to the blackboard and she or he ran the fingernails down, oh, a few of you are already doing that. Ooh, that just drove you crazy. We do, once again, each of us has our threshold for sensory sensitivities. For some kids, that threshold is more quickly reached than for other kids. For some kids with FASD, it's more quickly reached. So that auditory stimulation can be very bothersome. The scratching noises of chairs on the floor to some kids can be like the scratching noises of fingernails on a blackboard. The hum that we get from the lights that are up here can be very annoying, distracting. But here's what takes place. Here's what happens. Everybody else in the class is able to focus on the teacher to see what's taking place. If you're the student with FASD, you might be the only one who's bothered by the sounds of those lights up there, and you don't even know that you're bothered by them because they've already always been there. But it just increases the defensiveness of your sensory system, so you're there like this, and then the teacher or the EA comes over and says, what I'd like you to do now, and you say, what I'd like you to do now. That sensory system again. So what can we do about the sound system when taking a look at it? For some people, it's using a softer voice, and I've seen that effectively happen with some teachers who have just reduced their voice, got closer to the kids. Reducing the volume, for example, if you're in the home of a TV or radio. For some kids, it's a matter of allowing them to use headphones within the class. Now, I know some of you are saying, I can't use headphones within the class because nobody else gets a chance to do that. I think Dr. Pai emphasized this really, really well in her presentation. It's not about being fair. It's about being equitable. Sure, it's not fair because Johnny might be the only one who gets headphones in there. But it's not about being fair. It's about giving everybody what they need so that they're able to learn most effectively. If you have a student in a wheelchair and you have steps going up to your school, what do you do to help that student so that they can independently participate? What do you do?
Build a ramp.
You build a ramp. You don't even think twice about it because it's a noticeable physical disability. Now, do other kids in your classroom want to get in that wheelchair? If you've ever had a kid in a wheelchair, you know that. Other kids want to be in there, and sometimes you allow them to get into the wheelchair, but they don't get to have a wheelchair. They don't get to have special things. We'll change washrooms so that there's a stall for individuals. There's handicap parking right out here. I don't get a chance to park in that. Is that fair? I got here first. No, but it's equitable. It's making a difference in the lives of kids by giving them what they need rather than giving them what everybody else is getting. So some kids, really, it's beneficial for them to have some headphones in the classroom. Oh, by the way, there have been some interesting research on what kind of music kids can listen to while they're there to help them to attend and focus better. What do you think the music is that is most beneficial for kids to listen to? Classical. Some really early research suggested classical music, that quiet stuff, that pachelbel, dude, was really nice, and it does do a nice job on it. But what was interesting was that allowing the kids to choose their own music was even more effective. So, of course, you still have to have guidelines within the school as far as what music you're going to allow them to listen to. Don't give up your teaching and structure just because a student has FASD. Enhance your teaching and structure. Oh, things like tennis balls on the bottom of chairs. Lots and lots of teachers are using that now. The key is to pay attention. Does Jason, when he falls on the floor holding his ears, is it because he's being defiant? Or is it because there's some sensory sensitivities? If it's sensory sensitivities, then what we need to do is come up with a way that Jason can participate in class while listening to O Canada without having to hear the likes of my voice. What's one idea that you can come up with? What would you do? Yes? Oh, sure. So you could just give them earplugs. That would be a way of doing it. Great strategy. Sometimes it's using earplugs. Sometimes it's actually putting the headphones on and playing O Canada, and he can sing along quietly to that. Great idea. You guys are the creative ideas ones. It's just understanding what's taking place with the students. Visual things that are there. Lots and lots of visual things. These lights, by the way, blink. Fluorescent lights blink, but they're usually blinking so quickly that we don't notice them. However, for some kids, that blinkingness can be very annoying. Just like when it is burning out, that's annoying to us. So it can be very annoying. Right behind me, we've got a blank wall. Jason's classroom was like a typical ECS classroom. There was things hung from the walls and ceiling, and it was colorful and bright and cheerful. And he's like this. He's all the time, because he's over. It's like going to a rock and roll concert. And there's people singing and yelling and up and down, and there's all these visual things. I know we went to Celine Dion last year. It was great to go to, but at the end of the night, I just wanted to cover up my face. I just wanted to crawl into a cocoon and shut off all of those senses that were there. So for Jason, what we ended up doing, parents were really, really supportive. They said, we need to cover up some things. So they got some sheets, and they just covered up various aspects of the classroom unless they were being used by the kids, particularly during circle time. Smell, taste. I remember this one little fellow that I was working with. Now, he had autism. Kids with FASD and kids with autism sometimes share some similar characteristics. Kids with autism also have some high sensory needs. I don't have an example of smell for a child with FASD, but I do have one with autism. I was working with him, and I was doing some work with him. Every time he came into the classroom, he was a really neat guy. He'd say hi to Dwaine, and we'd talk. But as I got closer to him, he'd back up, and he'd sometimes get angry. Finally, one day I said to him, you know, what's happening when I get closer to you? You seem to be bothered by that. And he looked at me and he said, coffee breath. I said, what? Coffee breath. I said, what? He said, coffee breath. You got coffee breath, and it stinks. We all stink to one degree or another. I know at our church, for example, we have an area, some pews that are perfume-free because some people can't pay attention to the pastor when they're smelling the next person beside them. For those of you who work in a high school, you know what that's like. You walk into the kids' locker room, or you open up that locker, and if they've had clothes sitting in there for any length of time, it smells. When that occurs, we have a difficult time focusing, attending, and dealing with the situation, the environment that's out there. If we can reduce some of that, then it's helpful for them. So it's understanding the unique characteristics as it comes to sensory stimulation. Now we can talk about missing subtle social cues. When we talk about missing subtle social cues, so moving on. Oh, before I move on, sensory, any questions that you might have with regards to sensory processing then? Okay. And if you have questions, you can always email me afterwards for those of you who are on various sites. Here's your first task for this afternoon. When we're talking about attention, let's address this. What I'd like you to do here, and you at the sites, wherever we are, is to pay attention to this slide. Take a close look at it, because I'm going to ask you some questions about the slide. So memorize the slide, pay close attention to it. Now, having said that, I'll let you look at it for 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You did a really good job of that. Oh, what about attention? Here we go. No way the teacher said that I have the shortest attention span. No way she said I do. You do what? I don't know. What were we talking about? You know, sometimes kids with FASD, they just lose it. They lose focus on what's there. Sometimes they don't focus on the things that we want them to focus on. For example, how many people, I asked you to memorize that slide, and you all were looking at it very carefully. You were attending to it. You were looking at it. Good attention, or at least like you looked like you had a good attention. How many people were in the logo on the top left-hand side of that slide? 2?
I need my glasses. It was pretty small.
It was pretty small. Now we're getting excuses, right? I need my glasses. Yeah, I wasn't look. How many people weren't looking at that? Right. Why weren't you looking at that? Didn't I say look at that? Sure I did. But when I said look at that, you were focusing. How many people focused on the words? How many people, if I asked you what those words were, you'd probably get at least a few of them? Absolutely. That wasn't my instructions. When I gave it to you, there are 2 people in the top left hand. Can you see them a little better now? Yeah, that's a little harder. You're right, it is harder to see, but good for you. But we do get kids with FASD then, and other kids who do come up with excuses for there because they don't want to look dumb or stupid. You know, it's better to No, I'm not saying, please. You did a great job of doing exactly what I wanted you to do, and that is come up with other ideas, other reasons for it being there. So really, for some kids, they have a difficult time knowing what you want them to look at because they don't have that same kind of processing ability to be able to block out those distractors that are there, to know what you want them to focus on. There's an assumption on our part that right now I'm talking, you're looking at me, you're listening to what I say rather than focusing on some of the other things in this room or in the rooms that you're in that you could be focused on. Attention. So what can we do about attention then? Well, we know that what it looks like for kids with attentional difficulties is that they sometimes miss instructions. So they'll miss that instruction that I just gave, which was to look at the slide. I didn't say look at the words, I said look at the slide. And sometimes they'll respond to irrelevant kinds of questions. For a period of time, we had a young lady who came and stayed with us. We decided as a family that we become host family providers. And so we looked after a young lady, a young girl at that point in time. I'll call her Sally. Not her real name, and might not have even been a she. But she came to stay with us for a year, and she actually stayed with us for 3 years. And we had the opportunity of having Sally stay with us on weekends, on some evenings, some holidays with us. So it was a wonderful experience. Although the first night that we met Sally, it was the most delightful experience. And the first weekend that Sally stayed with us, it was like a hurricane hit our household. It was quite a unique experience having Sally in our home. But Sally was one of those people who really had a great memory for some things. She was wonderful for remembering names. I'm very poor at remembering names. So it was great because she'd meet you once and she'd get your name. And when she got your name, then it was great for me because we'd be walking down the mall someplace. And when we were walking down the mall, we would see somebody and I'd say, Sally, what's that person's name? And she'd tell me the name, and then I could walk up and go, see, I've already forgotten your name. I'm sorry. Lori. I'd walk up, who is that? That's Lori. And it would be very helpful because then I'd look really good. So she was really good at that. But she would miss instruction. She would miss information that would be there that could be very potentially helpful for her. And she would respond with questions, with answers to questions that were a little bit off the wall in terms of, you know, we were watching the Rolling Stones on TV one day. And she said, oh, I've been to see the Rolling Stones. And we said, well, what do you mean you've been to see the Rolling Stones? She said, I've been to see the Rolling Stones. And so we contacted her mom because, you know, that's great. She been to see the Rolling Stones. And mom said, yeah, she saw the Rolling Stones last year, but it was on TV again. So it was just missing some relevance in terms of cues. They might look attentive, but not be able to process the information and be easily distracted. So attentional kinds of difficulties are there. What can we do? I've been in a number of classrooms. The strategies that I'm going to share with you today, a lot come from me being in the classroom, watching teachers, watching educators, watching EAs make a difference in the lives of kids. A lot of those suggestions, by the way, are in this book, Teaching Students with Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder. Each school in Alberta should have a copy of this. The schools outside of Alberta can get it online through Alberta Learning, Alberta Education now. It is excellent. It's got lots of really good specific strategies. Strategies such as providing a study carrel. Walked into a classroom and a teacher had a child with FASD in her classroom, and she was really wondering about what to do with kids this child. I'll call him Bobby's attention. And so what she ended up doing was bringing a carrel. Just a 3-sided piece of cardboard that she put up on his desk. But she didn't want him to look different, so everybody had this beside their desks, and they just pull it up and put it on their desks, and then they do some work. And after they finished doing that paper and pencil task or the work that they had to do, they put it down on the side of the desks. So it was really neat to see them doing that. Oh, by the way, some strategies work well for kids with FASD when we talk about attentional strategies. And some, when we think about kids with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, a carrel would never work for them because they notice everything anyway. So they'd be peeking around the carrel. But for some kids with FASD, they work. limiting the materials in a lesson, limiting the amount of information that's in a desk, providing a written copy of what you're doing so it's there, and then being prepared to repeat and to repeat and to repeat. And as frustrating as that might be, it's not because the student is deliberately or intentionally not following the instruction. It's because they just didn't attend to it in the way we want. So attention is one area. Let's talk about missing social cues. What I'd like you to do now is just take a look at this. You've got it. Flip over your handouts. Write down what you saw in that triangle. Just write down what you saw in the triangle. Now, this is an easy task. Count how many words you just wrote down. Just by a show of hands, how many people wrote down the number 1? Okay, good. How many people wrote down the number 2? How many people wrote down the number 3? How many people wrote down the number 4? Oh, you guys are good. What did you write down? Paris in the spring? Paris in the spring. How many people wrote down 5 words? Let's take a look at this one more time. How many words are there? 5. That was wrong. We miss social cues. For kids with FASD, they miss the social cues because they've come to expect certain things. We've come to expect certain things. Most of our social behavior is learned incidentally through our observations of other people. Most of what we do, we pick up from other people. I'd like another volunteer to come up and join me in an elevator. Marlene, thank you. They're my name thing again. I'm convinced that at one point in time, the aliens came down, grabbed me, took me up to their spaceship, and sucked that area of the brain out that has the memories for them. Sally was so helpful. Marjorie, you're Marlene. There we go. You're going to be Marjorie. Marlene, thank you. Marlene, we're in an elevator. Or let's say you get into an elevator. It's 8 o'clock at night. We're in this building. You get into the elevator. Where do you stand?
To one side.
Okay, so you're in there by yourself. You stand to one side. Okay, good. I get in the elevator. Where do you want me to stand?
I don't care.
If I get in the elevator and stand right here, how are you doing right now?
I'd feel uncomfortable, unless I knew you.
Yeah, you don't. I'm a stranger.
Yeah, well.
So you're going to move over to the other side, right?
No, if I'm in the corner, I wouldn't move.
Okay.
But I would feel uncomfortable.
You'd feel uncomfortable. Who taught you where to stand when you went into an elevator?
It's a space thing that you learn, I guess, when you don't have fetal alcohol damage.
It's a spacing, right, because you pay close attention to the cues that other people are going. First of all, you pay attention to your feelings, and if you don't have those kinds of feelings, if I'm standing like this with you right now, you might pay attention. You've got a big smile on your face. You're very uncomfortable right now. And we pay attention to, thank you very much, and we pay attention to other people's feelings. So we watch their faces. If you're in a junior high, middle school, kids do this all the time. They watch other kids. And they pay attention to them because they do what other kids are doing, or they intentionally don't do that, but they watch very carefully. If you miss those subtle social cues, if you're not able to pay attention to them for whatever reason, same reason that you weren't able to see that extra the, if you can't see them, then how are you supposed to learn those subtle social cues? Sure, in kindergarten, we teach you things like saying please. We teach you things like saying thank you. Kindergarten does that really great. We teach you how to take turns, and kids do that. But most of our social behavior comes from watching other people and doing what they're doing. Went to Australia for a few years ago, and it was really uncomfortable in terms of watching and learning from them, in terms of picking up the social cues and the understanding, particularly when it comes to language. So we went over to visit some people who I was working there. They invited us over, and they invited us over for tea. Now, anybody been to Australia? Okay, good. Don't fill in the answers here. So, so they invited us over for tea at about 7 o'clock in the evening. So we had a big dinner before we went out to their place for tea. We showed up there, and lo and behold, in Australia, if you're invited out for tea, you're invited out for dinner. Not for a cup of tea, but you get a full-blown dinner. We'd already had dinner, but because we wanted to, impress our host, we ate twice. Of course, then it was so full I needed to go to the bathroom. I asked the people, where's the bathroom? You know, can I go to the bathroom? And they looked at me, a strange look. And, you know, when they looked at me funny, you know, I got a funny feeling in. Now, sometimes kids with FASD aren't going to do that, but not get that funny feeling because they're not picking it up. But so they said, oh, it's down the hall and to your right. So I walked down the hall and turned to the right. And sure enough, that was their bathroom. That's where they took the baths. I came back saying, that's not quite what I had in mind. Where's your washroom? And they said, oh, my washroom? What do you want to go to the washroom for? It's down the hall to the left. So I went down, sure enough, that's where they had their washer and dryer. At this point in time, I'm becoming very uncomfortable. And they're laughing. You know, they figured it out. I came back and they said, where's the place where you go when you got to go? And they said, oh, you mean the toilet? Why didn't you just say what you mean? Social cues, we don't pick up on those social cues, especially when we talk about the communication skills of kids with FASD. A lot of it is in the pragmatics, the understanding of what's being said. Rather than just saying it, it's the understanding of what's being said. So it impacts our social behavior. What can you do then? Well, what we do know about it is that for kids with FASD, it impacts them in a number of different ways. First of all, they have difficulties in terms of they act younger than their chronological age. Sally, when she came to us, she was 8 years old. And 8 years old have a little bit of decorum about them, but Sally was just, in terms of what was taking place, she would hug anybody. She would go up to them and give them big hugs and sit on their knees, which wasn't too bad. It was a little bit uncomfortable as an 8-year-old. But you know, as a 13-year-old, if she goes up and sits on a 15-year-old boy's knee and says, give me a big hug, she's sending one message, or she's trying to send one message, which is, this is nice and comfortable, and she's sending another whole message to that 15-year-old boy, which is, whoa, boy, this is good. It's not picking up on those social cues, not following rules and games, and saying things that are inappropriate, sometimes a bit rude, saying things or acting in ways that disturb people. There's some nice research being done out of this book by Streisgood in terms of taking a look at the developmental ages of kids when they're 18 years old. So at age 18, they found that kids with FASD have expressive language. Do you want to just of about a 20-year-old? So they can talk a whole lot, but you know, they don't understand necessarily what they're saying, but they can talk a whole lot. Sally was really good at doing that. Actually pretty good at reading decoding. She was doing that quite well. Reading comprehension, though, she could decode it. And this is something that we take a look at when we're doing testing. I was just testing a young girl today, and her reading decoding was really good. In fact, she could read made-up words, such as flibbot. But when she read the words in a passage, she could read those quite well. She just didn't understand what she was reading at about a 6-year-old age range. Emotional maturity of about a 6-year-old. Social skills of a 7-year-old. So if you've got an 18-year-old girl who's socially acting like a 7-year-old, what does that mean? It means that they want to have fun, they want to laugh, they want to tell the same joke over and over again. Okay, here's your joke for the day. Knock, knock. Dwaine? Dwaine, the bathtub, I'm drowning. Okay, you chuckled about it once. But then if I tell it 2 or 3 more times, you're going to stop chuckling about it. Kids like to repeat the same things over and over again. If we think about a child who's 6 years of age, but going on developmentally 3 years of age, the 6-year-old will pay attention for an hour. Somebody 3 will pay attention for 10 minutes. So they're not going to attend as long. 6-year-old will line up on their own. A 3-year-old will need to be shown. A 6-year-old will wait their turn. A 3-year-old is going to be impulsive, out of their seat, jumping up, saying, look at me, I'm here. Take a 13-year-old. A 13-year-old, they're pretty responsible at that point in time. But if they're going on 8 developmentally, they need reminding. They're going to need visual cues. A 13-year-old girl or boy is going to have some boundaries, particularly when it comes to touching, at least when there's an adult around and they're not someplace that they shouldn't be with the person of the opposite sex. But for an 8-year-old, they need lots of touching, lots of tactiles. 8-year-olds are in your space. So what can we do about it? Well, social skills, like any other skills, can be taught, but we need to intentionally teach them. And in fact, if I can leave you with one thing today, intentionally teach what others incidentally learn. There's one of the slides that is coming up that says that. Intentionally teach what others incidentally learn. You need to intentionally teach where to stand in an elevator. You need to intentionally teach how to say hello, goodbye. We needed to intentionally teach Sally how to give compliments to other people, because her compliments were often rude. Not her compliments, her comments were often rude. They were snide, and sometimes they'd make people laugh. And sometimes she would just say, "Oh man, are you having a bad hair day?" And it was true. But sometimes you need to know when to say that and when not to say that. Intentionally teach. So you can intentionally teach them. To do that, it takes 3 things. First of all, you need to structure the environment. You need to set it up just the same way you teach math, or you teach social, or you teach reading. You say, this is reading time. This is math time. This is a time that we're going to teach these particular skills. This is social skills training time. So setting it up. And then you do 3 things. Good teachers know this. And you do it with the academic things. You tell, you show, and you let them practice. So you might be telling them, if you're doing math, 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. And then you show them. So you get out the buttons or the pencils or the widgets and give them an opportunity to put 2 plus 2 together and make 4. And then you give them lots of practice. You give them worksheets to do. And when they don't get it, so if they write down 2 plus 2 is equal to 3, you don't send them to timeout. You give them correction. So you help them to get the correct answer. So thinking about that, for teaching social skills, we need to do the same thing. We need to tell, we need to show, and we need to let them practice. Tell, show, and let them practice. Let me give you an example of how to use sentence strips in doing that, because that comes to the showing part. What's a sentence strip? A sentence strip is you just write down what you want the person to do. Each sentence goes on a strip of paper, and then you can put those strips of paper together. Some teachers have been very creative, and they put them on a key ring, laminated them, put them on a key ring so that the student can just flip through them. Other teachers have just taken them and put them on 1 sentence per recipe card, on 1 sentence per line on a recipe card. They give clear instructions of what to do, clear instructions of what not to do. You tell, you show, and you let them practice. Here's a couple examples of them. Here's a sentence strip. I get upset. I fold my hands together. I do not hit. I say that I am upset. Here's a student who was hitting a whole lot. And we wanted them to have a specific way of dealing with that would help them to do it. Often when kids are hurting other kids, we give them verbal instructions of what to do. We'll talk about behavioral regulation in a moment. But this just helps them to let them know what they do. Sally, she loved giving people hugs. And, that's really nice. What we wanted to do was we wanted to help her to not just give people hugs, but give only some people hugs. Who do you give hugs to? As an 8-year-old or a 13-year-old, who do you give hugs to? Your parents, absolutely. Who else might you give hugs to? Grandma, grandpa, absolutely. So those close relatives that are there, those are the people that you give hugs to. Who don't you give hugs to? Strangers. Now, what is a stranger? So you don't give hugs to that person that your parents don't know, that you don't know, and that you know nothing about them. What happens if your dad's boss comes over and you've met him a couple times before? Do you give that person a hug? No, so you blur the lines for it. So what we did with Sally was we gave her a list of the names of who exactly she could hug and why she could hug them. So it was grandparents and parents. And, we had some close friends who would come over who just, when an 8-year-old girl goes up and gives you a hug, what do? You hug back. It just supported what was taking place. But we wanted to teach her not to give everybody hugs. So we had to tell her. So we told her who to hug. We had to show her. and we had to show her what needed to be done. Now, when it came to what do you do instead of hugging? How close do you stand to a person? We had to make it very clear, very specific. I would like someone else to come up just very quickly, just so I could demonstrate this. Thank you. So Sally was, the in-your-face kind of person that was right here, right with you. And what we ended up doing was working with Sally. Just how far should you be away? Well, if you're meeting people, you go out and shake your hand. So shake your hand. Good. When it was a little bit awkward, a little bit funny, but it was better than hugging. But when you're just saying hi to people, rather than shaking hands, she'd just go up like this, and it had to be an arm's length away. Exactly. So it was not trying to figure it out, just an arm's length away. People thought she was a little bit weird initially, but she got pretty good at it. Just an arm's length away, because it gave her a very clear, specific distance that she could be with people. And then she'd go and she'd say hi, and if she'd met them before, she would absolutely use their name. It was really great to see. And that's a wonderful social skill. We also worked on her giving them compliments. So when talking about giving compliments, we talked about, well, first of all, you can compliment them on something that they look like. So for a while, she said, every time I walked in, I was wearing a lot of ties in those days. Gee, you've got a nice tie on. That was okay. We smiled. And then after a while, it was, gee, you've got a nice smile. And when she'd say, gee, you've got a nice smile, people would often smile. Thank you very much. So working on those social skills. When we talk about transition times and dealing with what's taking place with transitions, let's just talk a little bit about that. I know Dr. Pye gave some excellent ideas for setting up transition times within a particular situation. So when we talk about transition times, there's lots of transition times. The early school years, you're changing activities, you're lining up, you're walking in the hall. So transition times, some suggestions that Dr. Pye gave was just let them know when a transition time is coming. So in 5 minutes, we're going to go down the hall. We all like to know what's coming up and when it's coming up. You all like to know that I'm going to finish here very close to 6 o'clock. If at 10 after 6 I said, and we've only got 20 minutes to go, you might be a little bit frustrated with me, especially if you're parked in one of those 2-hour parking spots. But we all like to have regularity in our lives. So having that regularity in terms of knowing exactly when it's coming and how it's going to occur. Missing those subtle social cues. Middle years, we're changing classes. Those are really difficult, that switch from going from elementary school to middle school. So those transition times that are there. And then moving away from school later on in life. In your handout, I believe that you've got a slide that takes a look at transitions. Do you have one there? I don't have it here, but it's a grid. And it has, thank you, that's the grid. Exactly. Can I just hold up one of these for a moment so that we can make sure? Thank you very much. So we've got this grid that is here. And on the grid, it talks about the various transitions. Then we've got strengths and challenges and characteristics. So what the strengths might have. For Jason, in terms of lining up at recess time, that was really difficult for him. The strengths were that he really liked going out for recess. He liked talking with the other kids. He liked having fun, so lots of wonderful strengths. He was very verbal. He was very active as well, so he had some wonderful strengths. For Jason, the challenges were, for him, he had some very specific sensory sensitivities. We've talked about his hearing. Touch was also bothersome for him. So if people got too close, then he would, if they bumped into him, he interpreted that as them hurting him, and then he would hit them back. So taking a look at that being a transition time. And for him then, it was a different kind of lineup. What we ended up doing was, at the lineup time, there were spots for him to stand on so that he could stand on those specific spots, and everybody else would stand on their spots and be about a half an arm's length away. So it just organized his environment to help him to be successful. Now, you're not going to do that for middle school or high school students, but what you can do for them is, we talked about placing a line, having spots in lines, providing visual cues for kids around desks, For some kids with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and this one also works for kids with ADHD, one of the things that you can do is to put tape around their desks. So those kids who are in and out of their desks, they're moving around, they're always getting beyond their boundaries, and as an educational assistant or a teacher, you're taking time to redirect them back in their seats, to get them to focus on what needs to be done. One of the things that I've seen teachers use effectively is putting tape around their desks, because stopping the fidgetiness doesn't help. You spend all your time working on the fidgetiness, but keeping them close to the desk so they're doing the work does make a difference. So they put tape around their desk, and then there's a very visual cue to say, this is where you need to be, this is your boundary, and when you go out of it, then I'm going to come over and I'm going to ask you to get back in. And when you're sitting in it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to you and say, great, you're sitting in your chair, or you're at your desk. So a very visual boundary to help with organizing themselves and dealing with transitions. Schedules are really helpful. Schedules such as clean off desk, put on coat, put on boots, wait in line to leave. So it's very clear on what they're supposed to do for that transition time. It helps them to have that reminder in a very visual manner. And by the way, kids with FASD are like kids, like other kids. They're also like adults. If we write it down, it tends to be more effective. If we write things, my wife does this for me every Saturday morning that she's not around. She gives me lists of things to do. And is that helpful? Well, it sure works because I get a lot of them done. I'm the kind of guy, though, that if I do something that's not on the list, I'll write it on the list so I can cross it off again, just so I can say, look, I've done it. But that organization, it gives people a visual cue, an organization scheme that helps them to follow through with the transitions. Once we get into planning for transitions, we can use schedules, we can use social stories, talking them through what they need to do. So writing them a story about what they should do. High school students are not going to be in a situation where they like having somebody, an educational assistant, following them around down the hallway to get them to where they need to go. We can help them to do it, and we can help them to do it through telling, showing, and letting them practice. Dr. Pai gave a good suggestion in terms of doing that in a setting where the student doesn't leave with the rest of the other students but has a job to do so that they're not caught up into the hallways. The hallway confusion, that's there. Great suggestion. I like that one. I'm going to share that with other people. What I like to do is I like to tell, I like to show, and I like to have them practice. So if it's critical or important that they go with everybody else down the hall, then what I like to do is go with them quietly first, or have the educational assistant do that with them first before there's anybody else, map out the direct route that they're going to take, and then they follow that particular route. So they go to their locker, they deal with what's in their locker, they walk to their classroom, and they know the route that they're going to take. It's kind of like a mapping out of what they're going to do. But you tell them, you show them, and then you let them practice. You let them practice quietly by themselves, first of all, and then you let them practice with other students involved. Sometimes you encourage other students to bump into them while they're doing that, so they get the practice of being bumped into and knowing how to handle being bumped into. So it's that planning for transitions, telling, showing, and letting them practice. When they're transitioning from one school to the next, we do this for all kids. We give them an opportunity for them to go into, in grade 1, the grade 2 classroom. In grade 6, the middle school that's there, so we get them to do that. The thing about kids with FASD is that one trial learning isn't necessarily all that effective. So sometimes for those kids with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, it's important to have them go over 2 or 3 times for them to meet the teacher, to know where their desks are, to map out that transition that's going to take place so they know what's going to happen with them, to schedule it for them. Planning for transitions. Now we're going to get into the juicy stuff, that behavioral emotional regulation. That's the stuff that Jason was having a difficult time with. That's the stuff that Sally was having a difficult time with. When I say Sally was having a difficult time with it, One day, the school called us and said, would it be possible for you to come into our school and provide consultation for us? We know that you're the host family provider, but we also know that you work with lots of kids with FASD because Sally's being expelled from school or suspended from school because she was chasing the educational assistant around the classroom with a pair of scissors. And we really need some ideas or suggestions on what to do. Up until that point, we had said, no, we're not going to cross the boundaries. We did contact the parent and said, if you'd like, we will go in just on this one time. So we did do that. Emotional behavioral regulation, what is it? It's the ability to control, do you want to focus in on that? Thank you, Erin. Control one's activity level, to moderate their emotions in response to internal or external. It's just to deal with our behaviors and our emotions as they come up for us. Each of us has emotions, and appropriate emotions in appropriate situations. What's an appropriate emotion? When you see somebody you love. That's not a hard question. Pardon? Hug and a kiss. This weekend is Valentine's Day. I'm seeing mostly females in here and one male. As a male, what's our expectation for Valentine's Day? Help me out, my wife's. Flowers, chocolates, and diamonds in that order will put a smile on their face, I'm sure. Everybody here okay with flowers, chocolates, and diamonds? No matter what order they come in? Sure. If we do not give at least a card or something, if we don't acknowledge it, I don't know about you. I don't know about how you'd feel about that, but I think that I might be in a little bit of trouble in terms of what's taking place because there's some emotional expectations going along with it. And do you know what? It would be fair because I'm also expecting flowers, chocolates, and diamonds. I'm hoping my wife is watching me right now. Actually, skip the chocolates. Emotions. There's something called an amygdala. How many people know what an amygdala is? Good for you. So an amygdala is this part of the brain that's down in the core near the brain that is like an emotional mirror. An emotional mirror. It's the kind of thing that helps us to deal with survival as a species. An emotional mirror helps us to reflect back the emotions that we're getting back there. Sometimes when we talk about emotions, if we're in a fearful situation, let's say that the fire alarm just went. What are we supposed to do? Exit. We're supposed to exit. Why is that? Because we could be in danger. So we're supposed to flee. Or if there's a little bit of a fire over here in a garbage can, what could we do? Pardon? Step on it. We could put it out. Our anxiety would go up. We deal with it. So we're supposed to fight it or flee from it. Whenever we get into an anxious situation, a situation that's emotionally sensitive, we get caught up into fight or flight kinds of responses. Whenever we're in an emotional situation, our amygdala kicks in and we pick up the emotions for others. We know that this is an emotional, it's like a mirror, because we get influenced by those around us. What I'd like us quickly to do is just turn to the person beside you, whether or not you're here or on site. Turn to the person beside you and give them a big, warm, genuine smile. Go ahead. When you gave them that smile, what did they do? They smiled back. This will work 95% of the time. You walk up to somebody, you look at them in the eyes, you give them a big smile, and they smile back. Their amygdala just kicks right in. They don't even think about it. If you want a person to smile, look at them and smile. You get that emotion back. So it is an emotional reflector of what's taking place. And it also explains why, in some situations, some people can inspire you. Because they've got this emotional way about them that helps you to feel good about yourself. And when they're looking at you with sensitivity, with thoughtfulness, looking at you in the eyes and giving you a big smile, then you get that warm feeling. This is what you want to do this upcoming weekend on Valentine's Day. You want to look carefully at your partner. You want to give them a big smile, and then give them the chocolates, give them the diamonds, give them the flowers, or look at them and say, oh, honey, I wanted to give you all of those things, but I'm giving you a smile instead because I forgot. Some people can create wonderful feelings in you, and we'd like to be around those people. Other people can inspire other kinds of feelings in you. It's that kind of thing where you walk up to somebody and you say to them, Bill, the fellow who had those sensory sensitivities, the teacher would come up to him and say, Bill, I told you to be working. And Bill would go, well, I'm not going to do it. And the teacher would go, how many times do I have to tell you that? And he would go, well, F you. Because what was ending up happening was this amygdala was kicking in, right? You come up, you're a bit firm, maybe a little tad irritated that he's out of his seat. It sends that tad irritation to his amygdala. His amygdala sends back tad irritation to yours. You get a little bit more irritated, which makes sense. I mean, this is there. And then you send that back to him, and he escalates further because while the amygdala is the same, we have this thing called a cerebral cortex around us. A cerebral cortex is our thinking portion of it. It's our regulatory one. It's the one where you walk down to your car, and somebody's sitting in there with their key, and they're scratching something on it, and that somebody's a 10-year-old kid. You don't take that 10-year-old kid by the neck and go, even though you might like to do that, because your cerebral cortex says, do not hurt this kid physically. Haul him down to the police station, throw him in jail, do something with him that will get out your anger. We have the cerebral cortex that says, stop what you're doing, think about how you're going to handle that, and then deal with it. Now, all of you who are teachers, you know, as I do as a consultant going into the classroom, that my cerebral cortex protects me so much better when I'm working in a professional area than when I go home. So I can be with kids. I had a student once that I was helping the teacher as she was putting him into a timeout situation, and he grabbed my glasses and crushed them. And I was really irritated by that at the time. But you know what I said to him? We're going to put you in timeout. This is where you're going to go. And I picked up my glasses and put them in my pocket, and I let it. But you know what? My son, the day that he kicked the hole in the wall, I didn't say to him, oh, dear son, we're going to put you in timeout now. And because my amygdala, my emotional mirror is so much stronger. Your emotional mirror is so much stronger with the people that you love than the people with whom you work. So we get these emotions coming up quickly due to our amygdala. Now what that means is that those kids with FASD don't have that regulatory ability. So if you come up and tell them what to do, they might say, F you. You'd never say that in class, would you? You might think it. You might go home and you might say it to your spouse, especially if they didn't do something you like. But you're not going to say it in the classroom because it's there. The kids with FASD, some of them don't have that ability to regulate their emotions, don't have the skills, and they escalate very, very quickly. Jason escalated very, very quickly from one emotion to another. Oh, by the way, the interesting thing about that, I'm just going to go back. I don't know how many of you who work with kids with FASD, 1 minute they're yelling and screaming and hollering at you, and the next minute they're all lovey-dovey. And you're sitting there, oh, come on, you can't be lovey-dovey. Look at what you just did. You're carrying it, and they've changed it. Why have they changed it? Because they picked up some positive emotions from somebody, and they've let it go, and now they can get on to some positive emotions with you. So what can we do about emotional contagion? We know that we mirror the emotions of other people. Babies, as young as 1 month of age, if you smile at them, they smile back. So they're able to do that. We mirror ourselves. Oh, the neat thing about it, here's something you can try. You're feeling really angry. Smile, look in a mirror, and you're going to feel better. Because you've got your own amygdala kicking in, And so you can mirror your own emotions. You ever feeling lousy? Smile. Your amygdala will help you feel better. So you can mirror yourselves. Techniques. Now, what can you do about that? First of all, as a teacher, as an educational assistant, as an educator, be aware of the emotions that you're displaying. If you go to a child and you've got anger in here, it's going to come out here and be mirrored in that student, and they're going to feel that anger, and they're going to get more angry. So be aware that your emotions are going to be there. If you're in a situation that anger's occurring, one of the things that you can do then is to bring down your level of emotionality. So if that student is really, really angry, then you need to get down to their level. You need to focus on where they're at, and you need to quiet down so that you can quiet down their emotions. Because so often we get up there and they're angry and we say, "Look at me in the eyes." What's interesting about that in some cultures, and when we take a look at some animals in the animal kingdom, if you look at somebody in the eyes, it is suggesting an aggressive response. So your amygdala is saying, you're telling them to look at you in the eyes, and their amygdala is saying, okay, I'm going to hit you. So looking at a person in the eyes can be a sign of aggression and build up that emotional reactivity that is there. So be aware of the emotions that you're conveying. Let's be realistic too. Sometimes we get mad, and when we're getting mad, I think it's a really valuable learning experience. Very valuable learning experience for the kids that we're working with and saying, I'm getting mad now, labeling the emotion, and here's what I'm going to do about it. Often as teachers, as educational assistants, as educators, as parents, well, not so much as parents, but as parents as well, we hide our emotions. When we hide our emotions, it doesn't teach the kids on how to deal with them. I'll often recommend, and I'm going to suggest this to you too, if you're working as a team, educational assistant and teacher, that sometimes as an educational assistant, get mad at your teacher. Oh man, I'm so mad at you! Because if you do that, then they get to see how you deal with your anger. Why hide it? Remember, we want to tell, we want to show, and we want to let people practice. If you just tell them, when you hit, what are you supposed to do? When you hit, what are you supposed to do?
Sit.
Sit. When you hit, you're supposed to sit. When somebody gets you angry, gets you really angry, what are they supposed to do? Walk away. Most of the time we say that. Walk away. What's another thing that you can do when you're really angry? You want count to 10 or use your words. Walk away, count to 10, use your words. These are wonderful strategies as far as emotional reactions go. The thing of it is that you're trying to teach a child an emotional skill using verbal techniques. Teach emotional skill using verbal techniques. That's just the same as if I was trying to teach you how to play golf. I don't know how to play golf very well. But if I taught you how to play golf and said to you, what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to stand with your feet about 18 inches apart. I'd like you to keep your shoulders kind of straight. I don't know how to play golf, so I'm just making this up as I go. And I'd like you to grip the handle like this, and you never ever do it. Do you think you're going to be a good golfer? No, because we're using verbal means to teach a physical skill. Just the same as if we're telling a kid or a student, a child, to walk away, we're using verbal means to teach an emotional behavior. We need to tell them, we need to show them, and we need to let them practice. So we need to show them what to do when we get angry. I'm getting angry right now. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get angry at my teacher. And so I'm going to count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. Take a deep breath. And then I'm going to do something else. Or I'm going to get angry at my teacher and I'm going to walk away. Teach intentionally what other kids learn incidentally. Teach kids that anger is an emotion that all of us have, and then what to do with that anger. But it's not just telling them, because telling them doesn't work. If it worked, then we wouldn't have the problems with Jason that Jason had or that Sally had. Don't hide your emotions. Intentionally teach what others incidentally learn. One of the ways that I like to intentionally teach emotional and behavioral reactivity is using something called social scripts. What is a social script? This is what's really neat about social scripts. A social script can be used with 4-year-olds. It can be used with 8-year-olds. It can be used with 12-year-olds. It can be used with 17-year-olds. And if you're like Janice, she had her script when she came up here tonight. You can use it. I had my script when I walked up here too. We each have scripts. What are we going to say? What are we going to do in specific situations? And sometimes we actually practice the scripts. So I got here a bit early so that I could practice how I was going to start talking today. We have scripts. Neat thing about it for kids is that you can talk about social scripts the same way you can talk about movie scripts. So what is a movie script? A movie script is you do this, I do this, you do this, I do this. Brad Pitt has movie scripts. Angelina Jolie has movie scripts. Sean Connery has movie scripts. These guys, who are incredible actors and actresses who make bazoodles of bucks, have movie scripts. That's your hook for the kids. Because even Mickey Mouse has a movie script. Wherever they're at, you can talk about these people having movie scripts. So what's a movie script? You take a movie script and you write it down. Here's a social script that you might have. I walk down the hall following my friend. I see the water fountain. I ask for a drink. My teacher says, yes, you can have a drink. Now, this was a situation that we set up because this student was walking down the hall, would see the water fountain, would take a drink, and then never leave the water fountain. Now, was it because the student wanted attention? Was the student there because he just wanted to drink a whole lot? Was the student doing that because they were being defiant? Perhaps. Or perhaps they just didn't have the skills to be able to go that next step. So, social script. I walk down the hall following my friend. I see the water fountain. I like to put these on recipe cards, by the way. And I like to use red recipe cards and green recipe cards. This is a green recipe card. This is a go one. So it's telling them what to do. There's more to this. Yes, you can have a drink. I have a drink of water. Teacher says, now it's time to walk in. Line again. I go to the line and walk with the other students. I am happy that I had a drink. My teacher is happy that I walked in line. It's a script. I do this, you do this. I do this, you do this. So we tell them, then we show them, and we let them practice. So we practice this with them. And like any kind of movie, you take 1, you take 2, you take 3, until you get it the way that you, the director, want them to do it. So a social script. Social scripts are really powerful. You can use them for things like walking in the halls. You can also use them for dealing with emotions. Jason, we did some very nice scripts with. We didn't write them down at that point in time. I wasn't thinking about social scripts, but he practiced. He practiced sitting up at the table, working with other kids so they would walk through with him what he needed to do. The neat thing about not Jason, but other kids that I've worked with now, grade 3 classroom in Wolf Creek School Division, they videotape the kids doing a social script. So they'll go through, I've got a beautiful script of, or video of kids where one student will hit another student. So that was the event that occurred. And then the teacher will sit down and say, here's what you did. You came up, you asked if you could play, they said no, and you threw the materials at them and then hit them. So that's what took place. Is there another way that you could do that? Then they sat down and they took the 3 kids that were involved in there and they had them role play it so that the student who had difficulties was able to see himself, first of all, actually doing it, but then see himself doing it, and then they showed it to the rest of the class saying, here's what we do in this situation. If you are involved in a conflict, you've asked if they can play, they've said no. What do you do in that situation? And they walk through the script themselves. Powerful in terms of what's taking place. So it's been used as a video for grades 3 and 4. High school, what do you do for high school kids? High school kids, a fellow that I was working with, he actually ended up making a movie of what was taking place. So his responsibility was, he was given the task because he was having a difficult time. He was supposed to show respect. So the teachers wanted him to show respect within the school to other people. And so we sat down and talked about what respect was. And he really wasn't sure what respect was. So we wrote out some scripts for respect. And then his task, his goal for the next 3 months, this was in February, it was supposed to be February, March, and April, was to develop a video that they would then show the next group of students coming up into high school about what respect was. So he got to be partly director, partly writer, partly cameraman for doing it. But through that, he got to tell people what respect was. He got to show people what respect was. And then he got practiced it a whole lot. Because of that, his respect developed. So easy to get caught up into just telling kids what to do and how to do it. It's more important to show them what needs to be done. So you tell, you show, you role play, you practice, and you prompt. Diane Melbourne wrote a really great book called Trying Differently Rather Than Trying Harder. Trying differently. Jason's teachers were trying really, really hard with him. They just needed to switch around, have a paradigm shift from trying harder to trying differently. Great book to read. Diane Melbourne says, what we need to do is take a look at why is it that people aren't doing what we want them to do. You get to do this right now. For those of you, let's pass around some pencils. Those of you who are on site, get your writing utensil. We've got magic pencils here that we're passing around. They won't get around to everybody. Pick up your writing utensils that you do have. This is what we're going to do. We're going to take this writing utensil, put it in front of you. I'd like you to put it down on the desk right now, right beside you. And I'd like you to put your hands together like this. Okay? Thumbs up. That's an easy one. Now put your hands together like this with the thumbs down. Thumbs up. Thumbs down. Thumbs up. Thumbs down. Excellent. You're doing that really well. Now you take your writing utensil. You put it in your thumbs like this. Everybody's got it? On sites, I'm hoping you're doing this as well. Okay, you've got it like that. Very simply now, your thumbs are up. Now bring them down. Now wait a second. It's supposed to be just like this. Don't take your hands off the pencil. Thumbs are up. Take your thumbs down. No, there's no twisting involved in it. Okay, thumbs up. Thumbs down. Another volunteer. Bring a pencil. I'm going to be tough on you. Can I be tough on you here now? I'm going to be tough on you because I'm going to illustrate what we sometimes do as teachers that sometimes doesn't work so well. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, now get this. Here's what we say. Watch me.
Sure.
Do it. No. Here.
No.
Try harder. We can pull harder. We can push harder. How do you try harder? You're trying as hard as you can right now. How are you feeling when I tell you to try harder?
I'm okay with it.
You're okay with it. How do you think the student's feeling?
Frustrated.
Frustrated. Whoops. And now I'm dropping the pencil. One more time.
Okay.
Okay, ready? Watch me. Try harder.
Okay.
There we go. Still you're getting there. How'd you do that? Let's see it. Oh, you...
I can't undo it, but I can do it.
Go ahead.
I did it once before.
You did it once before. Okay. You did it once before. And that's what happens with kids with FASD. They do it once for whatever reason, and then we expect they can do it forever. Well, you did it again. Good for you. Just stay up here. Because what we do next, if you can't do it, is is there anybody else who wants to come up here? Just stay here. Help me out with this. Who's not able to do it right now? Okay, you're scared. Because what we do next is we do that thing called, if you do it correctly, I'll give you $20. You're doing it very well. So we try and reward them for something that they can't do. Let's be clear about this, folks. Motivation, so when we're using rewards, is only effective if the person can already do it. Rewards are only effective if the person can already do it. If the person can't do it, who's having a difficult time doing it? Nobody's going to raise their hand. Can't do it? Paying you $20, is that going to help you do it? It's not going to work. You can't do it. And then we go to the next step. So we tell them to try harder. We reward them so they're unable to sit in their desks and pay attention. So we try and give them stickers and candies and bubble gums and praise. That's not working. What do we do next? We do. We start taking things away. You don't sit in your desk. You're out of here. You hit. You go to timeout. You hit, you sit. Rather than recognizing that it's not that they won't do it. It's that they can't do it. Thank you very much. You did that so well. Give her a big hand. Can you bring that up? It's not that they, yeah, there we go, that they won't do it. Thank you. That they can't do it. Now, do we stop there? Diane Melbourne does a nice job of talking about we have to differentiate whether or not they won't versus they can't. Because let's be honest, sometimes that student, that child with FASD, they just can do it, but they won't. They're kids, and they're kids first. Bottom line. But sometimes they can't do it, and we have to be sensitive to that because the rewards aren't going to work, the punishments aren't going to work, the consequences will not work if they can't do it. Now, Diane Melbourne says, I won't till I can't. I like to go the next step. I like to go the next step and say, I can, to the best of my ability, with the support and assistance of those around me. I can, to the best of my ability, with the support and assistance of those around me. I can, if you reduce my sensory input. If I'm sitting in class and I'm looking like this all the time and I'm blinking a lot, then maybe what I need is a hat to help me out. Oh, sure, you've got a no hat policy in your school. Right. And we should have a no wheelchair policy in the school, too. No FM systems for deaf kids because, you know, all of these things everybody else will try and get away with. No, it's not about fairness. It's about if the hat works for that person, then maybe what they need to do is have that hat. Not all the time, but at those times that it's useful. I won't, or I can't. I can't do it because I, quite frankly, don't know how to deal with my emotional reactions when I get angry. People have told me that I'm supposed to count to 10, and that's what I say. What are you supposed to do when you get angry? Well, I'm supposed to count to 10, and then I get angry, and I blow up because nobody showed me what to do. The teachers never showed me what to do when they got angry. Teachers never ever let me practice. When I got angry, I always went to timeout because I would end up hitting. We set up situations. We practice it with them. I won't, or I can't, or is it I can to the best of my ability with the supports and assistance of you doing what you're able to do to work the magic in that student's life. They have difficulties with consequences because of a number of things. One is that they have to remember, oh, if I did this, then this is going to happen. Oh, yeah. But they have to link it together as well. If I steal a car, I'm going to get thrown in jail. So why does that kid keep stealing cars? Because he walks outside, he steals a car, and he gets put in jail. Well, the car's there. How many people have practiced walking outside with him, leaving him alone for a couple minutes with the car running? I was working with a family once where the mom was saying, my daughter's always stealing money from me. Every time I leave the purse around, she steals money, so I try and hide the purse, which is great. Try and use that environmental manipulation. And when she steals, I send her to a timeout. I send her to a room. I ground her. She isn't, and she hates that. She cries. She gets upset, but she still steals. Why isn't it working? Well, because at that moment she hasn't had any practice dealing with that impulsive stealing. So we set it up. We set up a situation where the mom put her purse in front of her daughter. Said, I've got $5 in my wallet. Are you going to steal the money? Daughter said, no. Are you kidding? I'll have to go to timeout, get grounded, lose all these privileges. You're right. That's what would happen. Mom said, thanks for sharing that with me. Next day, Mom said, I've got $5 in my purse. I'm leaving my purse on the table. I'm going to walk over to the counter. Walked over to the counter, came back and said, did you take my $5? No. Are you kidding? I'm not going to take your $5. If I do that, I'm going to get grounded. You're going to give me a talking to. I won't like that at all. Mom says, great, thanks for not taking the $5 out. Next day, Mom said, I've got $5 in my purse. I'm going to go use the bathroom. A toilet, if you're in Australia. Going to go use the bathroom. Comes back out. Is the $5 still there? Yes. Daughter's getting lots of practice not stealing, inhibiting her responses, so that Mom can give her that opportunity, not take it away, give her the opportunity to learn. Hiding the purse just takes away the opportunity. Giving the opportunity to learn. Because it's difficult to link those actions. Link an action to a consequence. It's difficult to have that association and remember it at that specific time. It's difficult in terms of then generalizing it to different situations. So Dad comes out and leaves his wallet on the table. We need to teach that again. Teach each item that is there. We tell, we show, and we let practice. We teach intentionally what other kids learn incidentally. We teach intentionally what other kids learn incidentally. So what do we know about consequences then? That they're really effective with kids with ADHD. Not so effective with kids with FASD, although Sally was really neat. Sally was, we worked on a number of things with her after that first weekend. It really was. The first night that we met her, she came to our house. She was absolutely a delight, an angel, wonderful. And we thought, oh, this is going to be a breeze. The first weekend she came and stayed with us. I have a son and I have a daughter. Words were said in our household that hadn't been said since my son was 2 years old and he was starting to imitate what I was saying. You know what words I'm talking about. Words were said, things were broken, tempers flared, lots of anger, hitting occurred. When Sally went home after that first weekend, I'll be honest with you, we seriously sat down and said, do we want Sally back in our household? How is this going to impact us? What's going to happen to our family if she stays? Part of the reason, by the way, for Sally coming to stay with us was because I'd worked in the field and I knew how challenging it was for some parents who had kids with FASD. And just to give them that break, that respite time, so that they could have a break. But there was other reasons. One of the other reasons was we really wanted our kids to experience, to have the opportunity to experience a child with special needs, to see that they were more than just a child with special needs, to see the special qualities, characteristics, and wonderful things that a child with special needs, in this case a child with FASD, might have. So we really wanted our children to experience that. After that first weekend, we thought, what on earth are they experiencing? What have they learned or gained from this? It was a challenging situation. Sally and consequences, by the way. We set it up, so we organized our Friday nights. We had pizza and movies Friday nights. That's the way we used to do things when our kids were growing up. We were both exhausted, but both my wife and I would work, and Friday nights would be pizza and movies. And when we talked about pizza and movies, we would usually just come home, order pizza, put a movie in the VCR. We had VHSs back then, and watch movies. Sally came to stay with us, and we found that we had to do more because we had to structure our time, organize it, have nice transition time, because free time meant that there was free time to potentially have difficulties taking place. So when we did some things, when she showed up, we made pizzas. And every Friday night, she made the same pizza, but it took about an hour to make a pizza. We also used tokens. And with the tokens, every time she gave somebody a compliment, she got a token. If she got 3 tokens, she was able to get popcorn during the movie. We ensured that she got popcorn each and every night because otherwise it would be a bit of a struggle. But compliments such as, initially it was, Dwaine, that tie looks really good. And then it was, Dwaine, you have a nice smile. And then, Dwaine, it really looks like you might have had a tough day at work today. How are you feeling now? Good to have you home. So it was just step by step giving those compliments. If she got angry, that was okay. But if she got angry and hit or said a swear word in our house, she would lose a token. What was neat about the tokens is that the tokens themselves, I don't think were all that effective in terms of changing her behavior per se, because I don't think that she really formed a strong memory association for them. But what was neat about the tokens is that all we'd have to do is, with the tokens in our hands, if she showed up at our house and she was a little bit angry, we would just take the tokens out and put them on our hands. As soon as we took them out and put them on our hands, she'd see the tokens and she'd go, "Oh, you've got a nice sweater on today." So it was, the tokens meant I got to make a compliment. And it was even when she was starting to get angry, we'd take them, and if we had some tokens in her pocket, we'd shake them a bit. And she's getting really angry, she's about to swear, and she'd hear the tokens, and she'd go, "And, gee, you've got nice glasses on there." And it was the type of thing that it was great because it was immediate. She wasn't self-monitoring or self-controlling her own behavior, but it was something that was immediate. So do consequences work for kids? With FASD? Yes, I think they do. To a limited degree. We would also use timeout in our household. So hitting meant you set. Did that control her anger? Not effectively. Not as effectively as the social scripts did. Not effectively of showing her what to do with the anger and then building that up with her and then cueing her when she was getting angry. But what it did was it gave us something to do. So we had a rule in our house, you hit, you set. So we just followed through with it because we felt that it was important that that took place. The beliefs that we have in people and what's taking place. You become who you believe you are. Something called a self-fulfilling prophecy. Kids see themselves in a mirror of reflection of you, not just the amygdala, but in your eyes they get to see you. They get to see themselves in the mirror of reflection of their peers, of their parents. They look in the mirror and they see something, like a cat looks in the mirror. And that cat might look in the mirror and they might see a great big huge lion that's angry and out for blood and just on the prowl all of the time. You know those Code 42 kids, those severe behavior disorders? They look in the mirror and what they see and what they hear is that you are a severe behavior problem, kid. You are an FASD kid who can't control your emotions. You can't learn. If that's what you see in the people around you, that's what you will become. Or if you look in the mirror, on the other hand, and you see this big lion who you can cuddle up with, and it's just like a big stuffy, and it's warm and it's fuzzy, what you see is what you're going to get. What you see is what you're going to get. We know this. There's some really good research out there that says teachers influence a child's behavior. The most classic study is the one where the psychologist came into the classroom and he assessed a whole bunch of students. He assessed the whole classroom full of students, and the students were assessed so that the teachers came back and he said, "You're the bright ones and you're the not so bright ones." And lo and behold, the report cards came and the bright ones got the best marks on the report card. And the not so bright ones got the poorest marks on the report card. Then the psychologist said, "Oh man, I blew it. You guys really aren't the bright ones, you're the not so bright ones. The not so bright ones are really the bright ones." Next report card came. The neat thing was that the kids who were not so bright had become brighter. They become smarter over that period of time. The unfortunate part is that the bright ones had become duller. Now, we'd never be able to do that study ethically today, but it clearly showed that what we see is what we're going to get, the self-fulfilling prophecy. Because those kids were just randomly assigned. The psychologist made up scores, made up the students. The students were there, made up the scores for those particular students. What you see is what you get. Sally came to us. She had all of these letters after her name. She had ODD, oppositional defiant disorder. She had ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. She had conduct disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder. She also had learning disabilities, and she was educationally mentally handicapped. She had more letters after her name than most people at the universities get after being there for 30 years. She had them. I don't know how many kids that I've worked with FASD that have had all of these designations after their name. She was non-compliant, uncooperative. She was aggressive. She was a bully. She was a fighter, stealer, mouthy, swearing, failure at school, and unable to learn. She had all of these qualities, and you know what? As long as we saw Sally in this manner, Sally would be like this. She would be stuck. What we see is what we get. Here's your next task. What I'd like you to do, how many people, raise your hands if you can count to 10. Go ahead. Count to 10? Good, you can do that. Raise your hands if you know what the capital letter F looks like. Okay, good. You're all educators. You know how to count to 10, know what the capital letter F is. Take a quick look at this. What I'd like you to do, I'll give you 10 seconds. Count the number of capital F's in there. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now that you've counted them, write that number down on your handout. Okay. How many people wrote down the number 1? Raise your hands. Do this at your site too. How many people wrote down the number 2? Good. How many people wrote down the number 3? Research shows that 70% of people write down the number 3. How many people wrote down the number 4? How many people wrote down the number 5? How many people wrote down the number 6? How many people wrote down 7 or above? Isn't this interesting? A group of educators, smart, intelligent people who know how to count to 10, who know what the capital F looks like, and we've got a range from 1 through 6. Let's take a look at this one more time. Oops. Let's count them together. There's 1, 2, 3,
4, 5,
6. What happened that you didn't see the 6s? I mean the 6s, the F's. What happened?
Missed every of.
You missed every of. I kind of set you up for this one too, didn't I? We look for what we expect to see. I asked you to see the capital letter F's. And you picked out all of the ones with the F sound in it. You didn't, the ofs have a V sound in it. Now before we go a little bit further, those people who got 6s, before you get too smug, let me tell you what the research says. The research says that most really good university high-speed readers, the ones who are exceptional readers, only get 3. The kindergarten and grade 1 students, they get the 6s. No, I'm not saying anything about any of you. But what it does say is we see what we expect to see. If you're looking for the non-compliance, uncooperative behavior, that's what you're going to see, and that's what's going to be related to. Can I have a volunteer again? I've got one volunteer over here who does a great job. You're doing so well. Can we keep that up?
You realize they only think you've got one person in the class.
I know, we're fooling them. Just you and I doing it together. No, there's been a scan. What I'd like you to do is sit down here one more time. And this time you're going to be Debbie. And I'm going to be Frank, the kid with FASD. Only let's switch it around and call him Frank, the FASD kid, because that's all he is. He's the FASD kid, and that's how people see him. That's how he's going to be. So Frank is sitting at the front of the class. Put this into context for you a little bit. I'm called into Frank's school because Frank is on a 3 strikes you're out. He's been aggressive, he's been swearing, he's been hurting. He's on 3 strikes you're out. He's already hit once. If he hits 2 more times, he's out of the school. He's done. He's gone. I'm Frank, you're Betty. Debbie, thank you. Frank is real. Debbie's real too. I had no idea. So I'm supposed to come and I'm supposed to provide some suggestions. And here's what I see. They get 2 classes together of kids. This is grade 8, I think. And both classes are watching a movie together. Frank is sitting at the front of the class. Debbie's sitting up a little bit further, but they're all cramped together. About halfway through the class, Frank raises his hand, talks to the teacher. I couldn't hear what they were saying. Gets up, and he's leaving. So as he's leaving, he bumps into Betty the boop. Betty looks at him and says, "Hey, quit hitting me." Frank says, "Did not." Whomp. Teacher sees that. Frank is out of the room. He's sent home. Strike 2. Fits, right? What was interesting about it was Betty was sitting there when all of the kids were coming in, and I'll call him David. I don't know his name. David was walking down the aisle too, bumped into Betty, looked at Betty, smiled. Betty smiled back. They got chatting. I don't know. David probably was on the football team or the basketball team or something. Might have got a date out of it. Same behavior, different person, viewed in different ways, resulted in a different reaction. Thanks, Betty.
Can I go?
You sure can.
Thank
You're
you.
doing so well. Same behavior. It's what we see is what we're going to get. You saw Frank, the FASD kid? Be Frank, the FASD kid. He will always be the FASD kid unless we see more in him. So this is my challenge to you. My challenge to you is to see the F's in all of our kids, whether or not they have FASD or not. But every time you think of FASD, think F. And look for those F's. What F's am I talking about? I'm talking about the strengths that they might have. They're concrete thinkers. They're creative, artistic, musical, learn by doing, energetic, involved. They've got a variety of different strengths that are there. They're athletic. They're spontaneous. They're just there with you. They've got all of these wonderful strengths. They're strong visual memory. They're tactile. Not every child with FASD has all of these, but they do have strengths. Each child, each student we work with has strengths. Look for the F's in them. Look for the strengths. My task for you is for you to go home this evening and to think of 10 things that you like about that student that you work with. 10 things that you like about that child you live with. 10 strengths of that person. 10 wonderful qualities. Help them to see those wonderful qualities. You know what it's a neat idea to do? Take those 10 wonderful qualities that you've identified in the child, and if you're a teacher, next Monday morning, write each one of those down on a piece of paper. And then every Monday morning for the next 10 weeks, pull one of those out of a hat. And what you can do for some kids, they actually make themselves a brag box. And they take a brag box and they paste them on the outside. So they pull it out of the brag box and put it on the outside. For elementary school kids, this works really well. For teenagers, you can't. Although for some of the teenagers that I've worked with, they've actually put together this really neat book of who I am with poetry, songs they like, and special qualities. Maybe that first one that you pull out of there is that they have a nice smile. For the rest of the week, you look at them, and when they smile, you say, "There's that nice smile again." Do you know what's going to end up happening? Throughout that week, you'll see more and more smiles because they'll come to believe in themselves as being smilers. Next week, you might put something that they're great at. They've got a great sense of humor. So that whole week, you get to hear the knock-knock jokes over and over and over again. Look for those strengths. Look for the F's in the kids. When we talk about it, we want to shift in that concept from stopping behaviors to really preventing them by recognizing the unique characteristics, whether or not they have attentional difficulties, and therefore we need some structure to help them to attend, whether or not they've got some memory difficulties and they need some memory cues through repetition that will help them to learn. We didn't talk about memory today. We did talk about sensory sensitivities, paying attention to the sensory sensitivities that they might have that might be helpful for them, so that when they're sitting in the chair, sometimes it is a matter of them just giving them that sensory stimulation that is there. From stopping problems to preventing them. From behavior modification and using consequences to teaching, telling, showing, and letting them practice. Modeling it. You're the most important people in their life. Model it. From changing people to changing environments, and that changing environments means that you get an opportunity to see the positive things and what's happening for them. Some wonderful strategies and suggestions in this book, Teaching Students with Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder. This book is very effective in giving you some strategies and ideas. You are very fortunate if you want to come up and look at this. This book is being launched tomorrow at the FASD conference. You get the pre-launching of it. This book is Redefining Success, a team approach to supporting students with FASD, a strategy guide for mentors and coaches working within the schools. As Janice mentioned, I'm an educational psychologist and I'm a coach. I like to coach kids. I like to coach teachers because I believe that, I'm not talking about sports coaching, coaching them and becoming all that they can become. You are the ones who are making a difference in their lives. You're the ones who are their mentors, their coaches. You're the ones who believe in them. You're the ones who get to see the F's in what they're doing. What you see is what you're going to get. Continue to believe in them. Continue to make a difference in the lives of kids. Each of you have given up your time today. 2 hours to spend with me. 2 hours of your time that's precious. I know that you've got precious time, precious things that are happening. I believe very strongly that you did this because you care about kids, because you see the strengths, the wonderful qualities in each of the kids that you work with. You wanted to come away with some ideas, some suggestions. I'm hoping that I provided you not only with a bit of understanding and a bit of laughter in terms of trying to take part in this workshop together. I believe that you're the ones who will make a difference in the lives of kids because you're here, you're doing it now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dwaine.
You're welcome.
Thank you all for joining us. I hope this session has provided you with some insight into the implications of working with kids with FASD in the classroom. Thanks for sharing both your professional and personal experiences, and especially for the concrete examples of strategies that we can use. I just want to remind everybody that this is the last in the educational series. We have, I think, 17 more video conference series coming up between now and the end of June. I especially want to thank Dwaine for your commitment to creating a positive environment in the classroom. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you all.